Before we start that, I wanted to say that we had an item that was held, and Councillor Wilkinson, we had an item that was held and by Councillor Nussbaum, and so he has had his questions answered, so we can approve that. That was the part lot control and road opening applications, part of 300 Goulburn Forest Road. We had the motion that Vice Chair Tierney moved, and does everybody remember what the motion was? Refresher. Okay, we'll refresh. Yes. Yeah, he's fine. Okay. Yeah. So. Carried? Kind of. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then on the part lot control and road opening applications, part of 300 Goulburn Forest Road, is that carried as amended? Carried. Good. There you go. Okay, so now we go to what the people are sitting here listening for. Oh, yeah. But I'll yes, thank you. Oh, I've got 2 of them now. Thank you. Because I really have. But I drink the other. Okay, so item number 3 is the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, 1026, 1038, 1040, 1050, and 1054 Hunt Club Road. Right off the bat, we're not having a presentation. The planner on this file is Jean-Charles Renaud, and he's accompanied by his boss, John Herwire. And we have 2 motions that are going to come on this, and I think we should just put them on the table right now. The first one is the one that Vice Chair Tierney. This is Vice Chair Tierney. You have a motion on Hunt Club on minimum rear yard setback.
Yes, Madam Chair. Just give me 1 quick second, if I could. Forgive me, Madam Chair. Whereas the report recommends a zoning change to the lands known municipally as 1026, 1038, 1040, 1050, and 1054 Hunt Club Road, where it's been deemed advisable to make the changes to the zoning provision to give flexibility to the development should the proposed hotel building be replaced by a residential apartment building instead. Therefore, be resolved that document 3, details of the recommended zoning of the report, be amended to add the following text to section 2.c. 5. The minimum rear yard setback on the apartment dwelling is 3 meters. Be it further resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to subsection 3417 to the Planning Act.
Thank you. And then we have one that Councillor Brockington is going to be moving. You want to put that, read that one out?
I'll just put it on the public record now. It's something I'm considering and may put on. But be it resolved that document 3, details of recommended zoning be amended to reduce the recommended maximum permitted height from 26 meters to 20 meters, such that both buildings cannot exceed 6 stories. Be it further resolved that any further details on document 3 be revised to implement the recommended 6-story development. And be it further resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act. Just put that out there because we're going to hear from delegations and they should know that before they speak, but that's something I reserve the right to move further when we get there.
And I thank you for both stating those motions, because I think it's important when we have an opportunity and we have them in advance that the public hears from it. So our first speaker is Peter Brimacombe. Peter Brimacombe. Welcome, Peter. You're the Secretary of the Hunt Club Community Organization. And thank you for your comments in advance. Have a seat at that first mic.
Of the road there. That's it.
So take your mic and put it right in front of where you're going to be speaking.
Okay, that's
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Luke. This is 3 minutes, 30 seconds. I'm Peter Brimacombe, the Secretary of the Hunt Club Community Organization. The Hunt Club community organization is opposed to the development. Hunt Club is the busiest, the most heavily used road in the city. It's at capacity. The proposed development will reduce its capacity, increase the risk of accidents, and reduce its reliability. Considering the effects it will have on Hunt Club Road, all aspects are negative. U-turns, no traffic lights, no turning lanes. The only entrance is from the eastbound lane. It's on a steep downhill slope. The existing road is the most complex intersection in the city. The Airport Parkway goes over the road just to the east. There are 8 ramps to connect it to Hunt Club Road. You can see that up there. Just to the east, there's an exclusive bridge for buses. It has 3 ramps to connect it to Hunt Club Road. The existing design works. At the very least, the proposed development will be a burden on the road, causing delays and unsafe conditions out of proportion to the traffic generated. At the worst, the proposed development will cause accidents, which cause massive delays. A secondary parallel road to service the site would mitigate these negative factors, but there is no such road. The number of vehicles generated is small, but they will impose a burden on the rest of the traffic out of proportion to their number. These negative effects will come to light on future projects. When you widen Hunt Club Road, adding bus lanes to Hunt Club Road, widening the Airport Parkway. The proposed developments will add extra costs and delays. Okay. In addition to the transportation problems, there are the concerns the people that live on Bartlett Private, which is just across on the other side of the road. Where the proposed development is a little part in red. Just on the other side of the road is Bartlett Private. Right now, they look across the road and they see mature trees, but they will be cut down. The people there are concerned that the proposed development is out of character with the existing buildings on the south side of the road. Right to the west of there is a church. It's a one-story building, it's a big one-story. And to the left, to the west again, there's a retirement home, and that's a 3-story building. Okay, so it's worth noting the people on Bartlett Private get out to Hunt Club by a proper intersection with traffic lights and turning lanes. And they don't generate a burden on the road. Conclusion, at the least, the proposed development puts a burden on Hunt Club Road out of proportion to the number of vehicles generated. At the worst, it causes accidents which cause massive delays. The proposed development will destroy mature trees. It's out of character with the existing buildings on the south side of the road. The Hunt Club community organization is opposed to the development and urges the planning committee to turn down the application. Finished? Oh, I got 2 minutes left. I'm finished.
You have 1 minute and 24 according to mine, but who's counting?
Well, I think just in that minute, the picture tells the story. This is underneath the Airport Parkway, there's traffic lights. You can't see them. And it's working right now. There's the traffic, there's huge traffic goes through, and mostly without problems. There, that's my minute. Done.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Leeper?
Just a quick question. How do residents of Bartlett get out?
Okay. Across the road, that's Bartlett Private. You can kind of see it's right there. They go out on Pattermead, which is going straight north, and then they have to go west on Plant, where I live. Then you can't quite see it. Then you go to McCarthy, and there's a proper intersection with traffic lights and turning lanes. And now you can see it. So it's a proper intersection, and then they're not generating problems with the road.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Barb Shea. And you have sent in your comments ahead too, which is great. Thank you very much. Following Barb is John Sankey. Have you been here before?
I have not.
I didn't think you had. That's why I asked you.
Yeah.
So I'll just tell you 5 minutes and try to speak directly and then just pretend we're not here. We'll just be listening.
Well, that's easier said than done. My name is Barb Shea. I am a resident of Bartlett Private. I represent 10 homes in our community. We are what I would call RIMBYs. What we're looking for is reasonableness in our backyard. I have learned a lot about land use planning since this application came into being, and I've done my best. I did send you in some information before the weekend. And what I tried to do is pay attention to what land use planning is all about and what your roles and responsibilities are. And so what I've tried to do is point to places where I think there is discretion and there is you have an opportunity to make some decisions. We have 4 things that we'd like you to consider. One is consider the height of the proposed development. The height that is recommended under OPA 150, which I understand is not yet in full effect, but is 6 stories within 800 meters of any rapid transit outlet or hub. That's where this development would be, and yet this request is for 8 stories. So if OPA 150 should come into effect, all other buildings would be 6. Other developments along Hunt Club for great distances are no greater than 6 stories. The second thing that we'd like you to consider is to delay a decision on this pending what I understand to be called a community transportation study. And when I look at the information on that, those studies are often commissioned when you have a particularly busy intersection, and there's a number of parameters that I'm sure the city could speak to. But I think that's something that should have been conducted in this case, and it was not. The third thing we'd like you to consider is the impact of traffic, and I did send you the information. I've been speaking to people within the city, and I also looked at the transportation impact study run by the developers consulting firm, and I've drawn figures from there as well. Just to give you a sense of the traffic count from the speed display board just west of this development on Hunt Club, for 3 months last year, the number of vehicles was 1.4 million vehicles in 3 months. So that means 5 3/4 million vehicles go down Hunt Club on that side of the road, and they will be trying, along with the vehicles that are coming out of the development at 1 to 2 per minute during peak periods. They're going to be trying to share the same road. And the fourth thing that we'd like you to consider is directing the retention of more trees to meet the newly approved urban forest management plan. I've come for the first time because I believe in public engagement, and I appreciate your attention. We watched this morning. I know you have difficult jobs. I also know and I expect that you come to each of these decisions with kind of an open mind. You have a recommendation. We've done our best to put forward, I think, some reasons that you should see another perspective other than what you see or added to what you see from the city. So we also believe that things like the OPA was done with sort of a larger vision of what things would look like around rapid transit hubs, and we'd like you to consider sticking to that vision. I'd like to thank you for your time and consideration on behalf of my husband and I and my neighbors and the community and the millions of commuters that will be driving down along Hunt Club this coming year. Thank you.
Hang on a minute. Councillor Brockington has some questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Shea, for coming, to you and to Peter before you preceded you for the file today, and thank you for your engagement and involvement for the past year or so. We've been talking about Hunt Club Road in particular, and certainly when this file went public. You live right across the street. You live on Bartlett Private, which is on the north side of Hunt Club. So you're already aware of the current issues of Hunt Club. Can you just talk about your major concerns with Hunt Club Road and how this development will contribute to some of those concerns?
Sure. So actually my interest as I listened to traffic began before I knew there was an application or before the application came to be. And I started to make queries both of your office and the city as to maybe it's a simplistic question, but I was interested in what the vision was for Hunt Club, how much traffic we thought there would be, or the planners thought there would be when the road went into effect, and how much there is now. And there wasn't a straightforward answer, but I did learn a lot, and since we know about this development, in particular this section between the Airport Parkway and the intersection up on the top end, which is McCarthy and Downpatrick. My concern is, well, of course there's lots of traffic. It's a major heartless, soulless arterial road. That's just the way it is, and that's how you get people across this part of Ottawa. But my concern is the level of traffic in that area. There are, I believe, 9 in and out accesses in that one block, which is kind of unusual on a major arterial road. The intersection of Airport Parkway and Hunt Club is an LOSF. I mean, I've learned more acronyms. So if you got that on your report card, you wouldn't want to show your mom and dad, because it means that the intersection, it fails during peak times. And now we will be adding substantial traffic at peak times right onto there. So we're not saying don't develop. We are asking for a smaller scale of development to help make so that people can access, help reduce the chance of incidents and accidents. That would be my concern on the road. I have concern about pedestrian safety too, but I don't think you're really asking about that.
When this road was widened, there are a number of spots on Hunt Club Road between the Parkway and, let's say, Riverside that have had sound walls installed. You have a sound wall on the south side of the Bartlett property. Has that been effective, and what are noise levels like now?
Well, I know that it's certainly a lot better than having no sound wall. I can't speak to effectiveness. I guess the question I would ask of you or of the city is that sound barrier up to current standards? And I don't know the answer to that. So that sound wall has been there since we moved in 2003. I have no idea if there are new standards for noise abatement, but if there are, I think it would be appreciated if it's possible to look at it, because we know that intersection is now carrying more, the V to C ratio is exceeded.
Thank you very much. John Sankey, followed by Mildred Beachy. John's not here. Was he here this morning? Okay, but we do have comments from him that we received previously. Mildred Beachy, and following Mildred is Paul Norris. Thank you for sending your comments in ahead of time too.
Thank you.
So Ms. Beachy, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I am as well a homeowner on Bartlett Private, directly across from Claridge proposed development. I'm appealing this recommendation based solely on a principle of common sense. Also, my experience living in this community and walking the proposed site. I am baffled, absolutely baffled, as to why planning has recommended the approval of this application. Claridge is asking not for 5, not for 10, of a variance, but a whopping 58% on 2/3 of the property and 39% on the remainder. It is expected that the Planning Committee act on behalf of concerned current residents and make decisions based not only on the facts, all of the numerous reports, but also on some common sense. You need to pay very close attention to the presentations given here today and give a little more weight to what we have to say in person from our experience. It's the policy of the Planning Committee to equally weigh oral and written presentations. I'm here today to emphasize that unless you have stood on this property, you are not getting a full picture of the traffic fiasco that happens every day on Hunt Club Road. Traffic reports on a spring day from a non-resident cannot possibly convey the immense traffic consisting of tanker trucks, transport trucks, emergency vehicles, delivery trucks, city buses, vans, all at the rate of a total of 35,000 vehicles past my backyard in a day. The computer-generated shadowing report does not convey the loss of privacy, as well as sunshine, which I welcome during the darkest days of winter, despite what planning dismisses as minimal. Yes, Bartlett Private is homeowners, 25 homes, and we are opposing a multi-million-dollar development of 280 units. I do welcome positive change. The present property has 3 houses, and Claridge does build beautiful retirement homes. And what a beautiful view they will have out the back end onto NCC property. But now, just to get a little more bang for Claridge's buck, they want to put in a hotel. And today we learn we're going to be blindsided. Oh, maybe not a hotel, but an apartment building. Who would want to raise their children in an apartment building at such a busy, busy intersection? In the mock-up diagram that Fontaine has proposed, it paints a beautiful picture of a retirement home with exaggerated green spaces and no vehicles present. Compatibility, which is the ability to exist or live together in harmony, is constantly referred to in government policy and planning department references. This is not harmony. Significant impacts on the current flow of traffic on Hunt Club are dismissed, yet Claridge has recently agreed to reduce the hotel, or maybe the apartment building, as a positive impact on the site's transportation needs and impacts. So they recognize 1 story. We're asking for at least 2 stories reduction. Planning's response to too many hotels and retirement homes is dismissed as not relevant. Yet policy clearly states compatibility of existing buildings, environment, and roadways is to be considered. Claridge is proposing a positive pedestrian experience. How is that possible? Hunt Club is a treacherous, busy, smog-filled, arterial roadway. Period. No one wants to walk along it.
Thank you. Thank you. Hang on. No, I don't have any questions, but I have a question of staff while we're talking about the hotel switch. So you can go back and take your seat because I don't see anybody asking questions. But thank you very much. So my question is this. It is a last-minute change that maybe they may want to, instead of the hotel, have an apartment. So I have a couple of questions. Number 1, the transportation study that was done. would that have to be redone based on the fact of a different use?
Madam Chair, the current transportation study would need to be reviewed if the site plan control application would be modified in order to reflect an apartment building, if that were the case. It's not expected that there would be any concerns related to that, as the traffic impact would be less for an apartment dwelling than for a hotel.
Probably the pedestrian numbers might change, however. So I'm not done yet. And so my other question would be, what would the normal process be? I mean, today we have an application before us, and you know everybody on the planning committee has read the report. I don't know when everybody found out about the change to possibly to open it up in case they wanted to do something else. But what would normally be if we were to support this today, and then they decided to change? In a year or 2 years or whatever the market will bear is what we're talking about. What would the process then be? Be rezoning?
As currently proposed, under the GM zone, an apartment would be permitted. Committee has the ability to restrict that today. But in terms of the impacts, it would require a site plan application, full traffic study.
The setback would be different too.
The setback in the bylaw is different for a residential building than a hotel building. That's correct, and that's why the applicant has raised this issue.
And so that would be, but in that case, for a setback, would it be deemed to be, able to take it to the Committee of Adjustment as opposed to a full planning process for the setback?
That's a possibility, Madam Chair. There is as you know, a restriction under Bill 73 in terms of variances for a 2-year period, though.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Councillor Deans?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Well, Councillor Brockington and I hosted 2 public meetings, and certainly the issues around transportation and access and egress to that site and the impact on Hunt Club Road was central to the concern of the community. One of the things that the transportation planners that were hired by the applicant told the community is that the hotel use doesn't have peak time traffic to the same extent as other uses would, and that Hunt Club Road is failing at peak times. So presumably if you're now changing to an apartment, you would need to, why would we agree today to make that change when neither of the councillors involved in this have heard about it before today? Our communities have been told that Hunt Club Road is failing at peak hours and that the hotel use was not a peak hour thing, but apartment clearly is. People go to work in the morning, come back at night. That's peak hours. So I feel like this is bait and switch on planning day, and I have a real problem with that. So is it possible to separate these applications and address the retirement residents today and have them come back when they decide what they're going to do with the other part of the site?
It's certainly possible under the authority of Planning Committee to do so. I can't speak for the applicant's opinion on that, of course.
From a legal perspective, Ms. Santa?
May I ask to have the question repeated, Madam Chair?
So what's happening is Councillor Deans asked if it would be possible to deal with a part of the application today, that being the part that they're sure of, which is the retirement home, and have the other piece come back when they make a decision on whether or not they want it to be a hotel or an apartment building.
That would require a motion, Madam Chair, to split the recommendation.
No. But it's possible, is what I'm saying.
It is possible, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Or we have a motion. It's going to take a motion to add it, so you can just vote down the motion, which has the same effect, right? So anybody else have any questions at this, yes, of staff?
Yeah, just a quick question. So if the applicant in this case did build an apartment building instead of a hotel, and I'm certainly open to the idea of not dealing with this afternoon, but would that trigger Section 37 of the Planning Act?
My gut is telling me it would not trigger. We could confirm that, though.
Yeah, it's highly unlikely because it is. I mean,
Well, it's right now
I'd be getting Section 37 soon with the applications I have coming in, and I'm not going to, and that's a huge difference in height. So we need a legal.
You can confirm that. It would be great to know.
Well, we'll need a legal opinion on that.
Madam Chair, Section 37 proposal would be something that would need to be discussed with planning staff as to whether or not it would be applicable on the site. However, it is noted that we are only talking about 2 stories.
Thank you. Councillor Brockington?
So just first of all, to clarify, I was informed about the intent of the applicant today, just like everyone else. There was no advance knowledge. Secondly, my interpretation is the applicant wants to keep their options open, that it is not a statement that they are building an apartment, but they want to keep that as a possibility. And I think it's prudent to look at those traffic studies before making a decision. So if it was the will of this committee to put that piece of this land on hold and deal with the retirement residents, I would certainly support that if that was the will.
Or, as I said, you can just vote down the application, the motion that Vice Chair Tierney moved with regard to the setback. Right? Has the same effect.
It would necessarily have the same impact, because once you've said no to it, they couldn't come back. I mean, I think what we're saying is we would like to have more information before we consider that. We're not saying no to it, so we're not saying necessarily we want to vote it down. We're just saying we'd like more information, so we'd like to separate it. They're way ahead on the retirement residents from where they are on the other part of the site anyway. They haven't really populated their thinking on the rest of the site. So I think the most prudent thing would be just to split it for today and address the retirement residents, ask them to come back when they have more information on the other part of the site.
Well, it's an option, for sure, but I'm not going to get staff to draft it yet. I want staff to comment on what the work that they've done so far on this. If the thought about the apartment building as opposed to the hotel, when the representatives who are here come up to speak, we ask them. I mean, the thing is, the application before us is for a hotel and for the retirement. Okay, it's not for an apartment building, so it's pretty easy to deal with that. You just don't allow the apartment building. Can even have a motion that speaks to that. What would be your best recommendation, Mr. Herwire?
Madam Chair, if the committee were directing such, the details of the recommended zoning would have to be amended to restrict the use to the seniors' retirement residence, take away the hotel and apartment uses. Okay,
I don't know that that's an objective that the 2 local councillors want, but I mean, it's just one of those things that again has kind of clouded the what we're talking about today. Did you have something to say, Steve? Councillor Blais?
I don't know if there's urgency in approving this today, but given this last minute and there's some confusion, can it wait 2 weeks and come back next meeting? I'd hate to have the members of the public have to come back again, but if it avoids contentious ongoing thing in the neighborhood and then an OMB appeal, it might be better to just take 2 weeks.
I think the problem is that we just got this motion this morning. And if we had not, we would have been dealing with the application as it is, which you have consulted on. But to delay it by 2 weeks for what? You're not going to go out and consult again because you'd be consulting on the same thing unless they're adding a new use. And that would be entirely up to the applicant changing it, right? So I don't know that would be the result we want. But let's go on with some more of these. Yes?
I could articulate perhaps a little bit more. It may give the applicant an opportunity to better explain to everyone why the last-minute nature, what the options are, et cetera, as opposed to, coming to committee and getting a motion and then, having to make a
And they're going to come up, and we can ask them that questions. Councillor Hughley.
Madam Chair, can we just bring them up and ask the question and get to the chaser? Because I think, I hate to say this, but I also agree with Councillor Deans. I think at the last minute like this, we may want to hear from the applicant as to what they want to do with their application before we vote on something that's pretty flexible right now. Would that be possible to, because if there's other people here that are in line to comment, they may want to hear the answer from Claridge before they come up and make their comments.
We'll go with the list. That's what we usually do. Okay, we just have a few more people, actually. We have Paul Norris, but it's a good idea, but we have a list. Paul Norris, who's president of Hunt Club Park Community Association, and then followed by Rosemary Clark, and then the applicant.
Oh, thank you. You pushed the button. Thank you. Yeah, Paul Norris from Hunt Club Park Community Association, and I'm also, my in-laws have been at Windsor Park Manor on Hunt Club near the development for about 7 years. So over the past 7 years, I've driven between 12 to 15 to 20 times, unfortunately, a week to see my in-laws for various illnesses and whatever. During which time I've almost been hit by a bus, on a weekly basis, almost hit by a bus. Oftentimes a bus making a turn, a right-hand turn off of Downpatrick. When I'm making my left turn at the U-turn, that is silly, but making the U-turn, you almost get hit by a bus, or you almost get hit by cars who don't come to a complete stop or jump the light. Pedestrians are also dangerous to watch during the summertime, and during the summer as well, bikes are also difficult to see. So when you make the U-turn, it's a very short light. When you make the U-turn to head back east on Hunt Club, you're competing with all modes of transportation, foot, bike, bus, and car, and it's dangerous. So my suggestion would be, can we maybe staff or somebody make the arrow, turn arrow longer, give people more opportunity to do it. And also at the other end, at Bridle Path, when one goes down, when one makes the U-turn at Bridle Path, when you go east and you want to go west on Hunt Club, you go down, you make the U-turn, just the way the construction of you make the U-turn, when you want to do the U-turn, the median from on the north side of Hunt Club, where the little median is too small, so the lanes are very tight. So if you have a small car, you're fine, but if you have an SUV, it's difficult. You end up missing the turn, and especially in the winter, there's snowbanks, so it's very dangerous. If one brings in the apartment building, the traffic is going to go through the roof, and I'm not sure everybody like everybody else would first time hear it. But those U-turns are very dangerous, and the other issue that I have is last year I was involved in the environmental study with the widening of Hunt Club of the Airport Parkway, which is going to be 2020, 25, 2022, whatever, going to widen the Airport Parkway. I was involved in the environmental study. They had a study of the intersection at Hunt Club and the Airport Parkway, and it was it went on the west side of the Airport Parkway. It stopped just far enough to get the bike lanes, because they're building new bike paths on the west side of the Airport Parkway. So there's a new bike path structure coming in, and it's going to be at grade. So they have in that area right there. So I would ask, would it be possible for somebody to look at widening or looking at the Airport Parkway, the feasibility, the environmental study, to widen it out a couple of 100 feet down to include the new Claridge development, and also east towards Bridle Path, to include those two areas, because now all of a sudden we're introducing a lot more traffic, which wasn't looked at 2 years ago during the environmental study. So my question again to whoever would be, can somebody expand that study by a couple of 100 meters east and west to give people, transportation people, a chance to look at it and figure out what it's going to be. And on again, I'll be quiet after this, the U-turns are the most dangerous part of my drive to see my in-laws. My mother-in-law now, my father-in-law passed away. But it's dangerous. You always, again, 3 or 4 times a week, I'm almost in an accident. And I'm not it's one of those things. I'm not saying I'm not being careless. I'm just being a normal driver. And it happens quite a bit. And it's just dangerous. And I don't think it's a smart way to plan when they built Hunt Club Road, I don't think they planned to have every intersection having U-turns. And that's my thought for the day.
Well, thank you, sir. I don't know if anybody has any comments on that, and if you don't, that's fine. Perhaps the applicant does. They have their transportation consultant is going to be coming up.
Yeah, can somebody address how do we get the address on the environmental study for the Airport Parkway expansion, and that who can address that? Can staff look at that to figure out and give an extra couple hundred meters east and west?
Colin?
Yes, I'm with Transportation Services, and that's something that we'll look at as part of the detailed design process as this environmental assessment moves into the design phase. So I can get further information from you right now outside the meeting, and then I'll follow up with the design team.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Rosemary Clark.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me speak, Madam Chair. My name is Rosemary Clark. Can you hear me?
No, it'll be really helpful if you just pull. It's quite flexible, and pull it. There you go.
All right.
Better.
Perfect. My name is Rosemary Clark. My husband and I purchased our home on Bartlett Private when Hunt Club was already a 4-lane arterial road. I, too, am opposed to the proposed development in its present form. I have attended meetings that have provided input to the city on this subject and now wish to add my own perspective. Hunt Club Road has always been busy, and traffic has increased significantly over its whole length since the opening of the new access point to Highway 417 at the east end of Hunt Club Road, despite assurances that the increased traffic would be limited to the stretch between Hawthorne Road and Bank Street. This is a given and will only intensify as housing developments such as Findlay Creek and Riverside South continue to increase in scope. Delaying the widening of the Airport Parkway yet again will only compound the issue. Like it or not, Ottawa has a hub and spoke model for its major roadways. The limitations of this profile are well known, especially the constraints it puts on public transit. This is one of the reasons for the high level of use of private vehicles, but as others have already addressed and will address the traffic issues. So I needn't go over that ground again. What I want to address is the impact the proposed development will have on the individual households on Bartlett Private with respect to our ability to be environmentally responsible. Our street has mostly east-west orientation. This means that our roofs face north and south. Our living areas are at the rear of our houses and include large areas of windows. For those of us on the south side of the street, our living areas face Hunt Club Road and the proposed development. We currently benefit from considerable solar gain from those large areas of windows and the proposed development. Oh, sorry, I lost my place. We currently benefit from considerable solar gain from those south-facing windows during the coldest months of the year here on the 45th parallel. 2 8-story buildings will hinder that solar gain just when we need it the most. But my most important objection is that the shadow cast by the 2 proposed buildings will deprive us of the opportunity to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and our carbon footprints. Let me illustrate what I mean by this. We live in an urban area. Alternative power sources for households are limited. We can't use windmills or heat pumps, but we can use technology such as solar panels. Our roofs cover a large area because the houses are bungalows, built in 2004, which means that many of us will be reshingling our roofs within the next 10 years. This will be the perfect opportunity to adapt our roofs to carry either solar panels or even one of the newest technologies, solar tiles, which combines functions of solar panels and roof shingles into one integrated unit. Like the panels, solar tiles require exposure to unobstructed sunlight to function well in a Canadian winter. Building 8-story buildings so close to our homes will seriously impede this potential to reduce energy consumption and mitigate environmental damage by shackling us to 20th century heating and technology, which has proven to be such a major contributor to climate change. This is 2018, not 1918. Unfettered growth, whether in industrial infrastructure and output or urban sprawl or urban overdensification, can no longer be considered desirable. There are plenty of new hotels in the area, and none of them exceed the height of 6 stories. Obviously, their builders were satisfied that this was financially viable. There are already many retirement homes, including at least one that is a hotel conversion. There's even been a proposal on the books for what amounts to an entire retirement village at Walkley Road and Riverside Drive. How many retirement homes can the population of Ottawa support, given that most of us won't be able to afford them on our retirement income? As others have said, I'm not opposed to change in principle, but let's not maximize tax revenue to the city at the cost of quality of life for the city's residents. The City of Ottawa is a member of Carbon 613, whose stated commitment is, as a Carbon 613 member, the city can continue to demonstrate its commitment to working with stakeholders and community partners to reduce community-wide GHGs. Please don't rubber stamp this proposal. Either refuse it or reduce the height to 6 stories and increase the setback from Hunt Club Road and actually live up to the city's commitment to the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dean's question?
Just on this whole issue of the site and the height, and because I know you're across the street, one of my constituents said to me the other day, have we taken into account the topography of that site? Because if you imagine just looking at the site now, the Roofmaster building is actually on a hill.
On a hill, yes.
So when you're talking about setbacks in the site, are you imagining that the new buildings are going to be constructed on the top of the hill?
I don't know what the proposed topography is. I'm assuming that they will be leveling a little bit to reduce the slope of the access points from to and from Hunt Club Road. So I don't know how.
Okay. I'll follow up with staff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to ask Stephanie Morris Rashapur and Jennifer Luong to come forward, please. Jennifer is the transportation consultant, and Stephanie is with FOTAN. Welcome. You have 5 minutes, and I'm sure some people will have some questions. You have to press, yeah.
There were a couple of points that have been raised that I'd like to address. The first one would be with respect to the building height and the possible motion to be made by Councillor Brockington. I'd just like to walk you through our approach to deciding whether, in our professional opinion, the building height, the land use, and the density proposed would be appropriate for that site. So one of the things that we looked at was the surrounding context. So this is a relatively isolated site compared to a lot of urban sites. Across the street, there's low-density residential, so it's separated by Hunt Club Road by a substantial distance. Then to the east side, you have the Airport Parkway. To the south, you have the Green Belt, where we know there's going to be no development. And then on the other side to the west, there's an institutional site, which is separated from any proposed development on the Claridge site by surface parking. So with that in mind, we thought that this would be an appropriate area for intensification and some additional building height. We also looked at the fact that it has access to an arterial road, which Ms. Luong will go into with a little bit more detail, and the fact that it's close to transit. So we're within 550 meters of existing and proposed light rail transit, which will be coming down the pipes in the future. So this is an appropriate site for additional density and height as compared to other areas that would have similar uses and zoning along Hunt Club Road. I'd also like to highlight the fact that just to the northeast, within the South Keys Mixed Use Center, you'd have building heights of up to 12 stories. So we thought that locating 8 stories in this location would be an appropriate transition as you move westward along Hunt Club. With respect to the last-minute motion for the rear yard setback, what we had spoken to in our planning rationale was an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to allow for a mix of uses. The site plan application speaks to a retirement home on one side and a hotel on the other side. But really what's before you today was a request for a mix of uses on this site. And so that would include as well an apartment dwelling. We see that as an appropriate use. We also see GM zoning throughout the city where someone could go in and develop a property based on the parameters in the zoning with a number of different uses. So we're not entirely sure why an apartment dwelling would not be a permitted use in this case. It seems to be that the traffic would be analyzed at the site plan stage. Ms. Luong can speak to the type of report that would be prepared at that stage, but from what I understand, it would be similar to what has already been prepared, and it would speak to the change in the use. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I'm sure they do. But I just think that the problem that we have today is this is very last minute. It's entirely last minute, and that's a surprise. I mean, we all prepared to come to the planning committee based on the reports, and we don't allow, and I'll tell you, Ms. Nedden, Mr. Smith, Mr. Willis, myself, we don't allow, or Vice Chair Toon, don't allow reports to come forward that aren't ready, and we don't think that are fully ready to come forward. This one was ready, and what you did really by last minute, that's what the game changer is here. So we have, before any questions go on, I'll just let you know that Vice Chair Tierney has another motion to put forward. And please explain a little bit. We'll get Mr. Wayman. Don, have you seen this motion? Okay, can we get a copy of the motion to JC and Don Herwire, please? You don't have a copy? Okay.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think it's easier if I just read the motion first. First of all,
sure.
I'm withdrawing the original motion that does have the 3-meter setback, so that is now withdrawn. But the new motion, which will ensure that it gets circulated right now, I think is going to satisfy some of the items that we've heard here today. Whereas the report recommends zoning changes to the lands known as 1026, 1038, 1040, 1050, and 1054 on Club Road, where it's been deemed advisable to make the changes to the zoning provision to give flexible development, changes on the fly here, to the proposed hotel building being replaced by residential apartment. Instead, therefore, be resolved that document 3, details of recommended zoning report, be amended by adding the following text to section 2C. D, that the holding provision be added to the zoning permitting a hotel but not restricting for the purpose of an apartment area be lifted subject to the acceptance of a traffic study for the apartment confirming no adverse impacts to the operation of the road network to the satisfaction of the general manager, planning and infrastructure and economic development. Be it further resolved that no further notice pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act. So the holding provision, I think, is the main item in there, Madam Chair.
So before we go any further, we're going to all get a copy of that. When do we see that happening? 2 minutes? Okay, so we're just going to take a pregnant pause, or not a pregnant pause. We're going to take a pause. We're going to all get a copy of that. And also, staff, please make sure that Don Herwire has a copy in JC. Okay, so everyone has a copy, and Don, when you're ready, I would like you to explain in layman's terms what this means for everyone up here and everyone in the audience. Don still doesn't have a copy. Okay. Drink?
So, Madam Chair, as I understand the motion, the holding provision would apply to any residential use on the property, and the condition of that holding would require a traffic study for the apartment use to confirm there's no adverse impact on the surrounding road network. So the holding provision would apply to the potential of a dwelling apartment, but not to the seniors project or the hotel use. And sorry, I also understand the motion to
for the setback.
The setback has been withdrawn, so that if it were to be an apartment, it would be set back further from the rear property line.
Right. Councillor Deans.
Well, just one thing. I think this is good. I think this addresses like the last minute bait and switch on the floor and makes sense. The only thing that I'm just not 100% sure about is that the traffic study confirming no adverse impacts on the operation of the road network is to the satisfaction of the general manager. And I'm just wondering if that's normal. Like, would it not be normal that the community would have a chance to review that if they wanted it could come to planning committee, or is that still possible if they lift delegated authority from the general manager, or is this how you normally do that?
How we normally, sorry.
Madam Chair, yes, through site plan control, these are the kinds of things that staff would be approving.
So, but if it's through site plan control, the ward councillor always has the opportunity to lift delegated authority and bring it if he doesn't agree with the general manager. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
But I think you weren't here this morning when we got into this, because it's come up, this is the third time now, that it doesn't give God-given rights to the local councillor, that at some point the director of planning, myself, or the general manager can bring it forward to the planning committee if there's just, undue delays that are more.
I just don't want to give God-given rights to the general manager either. That's all.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, it's a motion. Does everybody understand it? Sure.
How is the roadway functioning presently?
Well, it fails like everything else does.
That's my point. If the roadway is failing, how do you define an adverse effect? Failing is by default the worst it gets, so how can you make it worse?
Madam Chair, Ms. Luong will be speaking to the access and egress from a transportation perspective, so I'd like to turn it over to her in order to respond to that question.
I had a 5-minute presentation prepared as well. Is now the time to do that?
So I'll direct my question then to the general manager, since they'll be the one deciding. If the road is already failing, what would be considered an adverse effect from the general manager's perspective? Or Colin will be providing the advice on that, so from Colin's perspective.
The level of service target for vehicles in this area, because it's so close to the rapid transit station, would be a level service D. And currently the intersections in this area are in the E and F range. So we would be most concerned about safety issues and any way to really boost the sustainable modes and connections that way. So the focus really should be on the connections to the rapid transit station and on safety.
Sure. Okay. I'll let the local councillor deal with it, but it basically you can't make it worse because it's already as bad as it gets. Therefore, the holding provision is useless. But
we're not going to rate worse, okay, at this one. So we already know that the top 10 worst intersections, almost half of them are directly related to Barhaven traffic, and some of them do include Hunt Club. But we have more traffic on Woodruff Avenue coming out of Barhaven than we're talking about at this location, which is phenomenal to me. I'm shocked by it. Okay, before we get back into talk about the Airport Parkway and where it sits in relevance, I think that we just need to come back and circle back to this. So you have your presentation.
Okay, thank you. I just thought I'd review quickly first the transportation documents that have been prepared to date to attempt to address these concerns. So initially there was a transportation impact study prepared in May 2017, and that is a more detailed level of study than the community level of study. It goes right down to intersection level. So it has more information than the community study does. Following that, there was an addendum prepared in September to address staff comments, asking for more detailed analysis at Hunt Club and Daze and Bridle Path, which that was provided. Following the second public meeting, there was a request regarding the standard industry rate, trip generation rates that were used in the study for the retirement home. And it was requested that we actually survey the Windsor Park Manor 2 sites over to the west to get actual data to vet the industry standard rate, which we did. And we prepared a memo with the results of that in November. And quickly, the findings were comparable. The industry rates were found to be a little bit low in the morning. We had estimated for the retirement home less than 10 vehicle trips an hour. The survey results, when we prorate it based on the number of units, so that retirement home's 135 units, the proposed one's 150, so we prorated up. So in the morning, there would be 20 additional vehicle trips compared to what was identified in the study. And in the PM, there would be 10 additional trips compared to what the industry rate gives you, so not a huge difference. Following that, there was a letter to staff prepared in December to address councillor concerns regarding the U-turns and possible mitigation measures that could be taken, including the provision of a mid-block median brake, so uncontrolled U-turns, as well as possible signal timing modifications at Downpatrick and McCarthy, and or turn restrictions, perhaps no right turn on red during different times of the day, as well as a review of other comparable arterial intersections around the city where U-turns do occur, and more frequently. We looked at collision data to see if there's a connection. Following that, there has been email correspondence prepared earlier this month to respond to more councillor inquiries regarding the volume of traffic to be added, as well as the impact to queues along McCarthy and Downpatrick as a result of increased traffic on Hunt Club. Just to quickly, I guess, summarize the findings of our study. We did find that the retirement, and I guess based on the updated survey data, would contribute around 30 vehicles an hour in the PM peak, and the hotel would be in the order of 80 vehicles an hour during the same time, so a total of 110 vehicles an hour in the PM peak at full build-out of the site. And that equates to about 2 vehicles a minute, or just under. The effect with respect to the U-turns, it would be adding 6 to 8 additional U-turns at Daze and Bridle Path, which currently the count showed that there's about as many people doing it today. So it is increasing that. That would be an additional vehicle doing the U-turn, eastbound U-turn, every 7 to 10 minutes. And then at McCarthy and Downpatrick, there's a few more U-turns anticipated there just because of distribution, we think, of the traffic coming to and from the north via the Airport Parkway. So there it's more in the order of 14 to 17 additional U-turns. so 1 extra car every 3.5 to 4 minutes. So currently at Dawsey and Bridle Path, there are dual left turn lanes and a fully protected turn phase, as well as a southbound right smart channel. So all of those things currently provide for U-turns happening there today. And at McCarthy and Downpatrick, we have a single left turn lane with a protected and permitted phase. So I get an arrow, but I'm also allowed to go in the green ball if I find a gap that's acceptable. Fully protected phases are usually when you have dual left turn lanes or there's a visibility issue, there is historical collisions or high through traffic.
Your time's up. Councillor Brockington has some questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you've attended the public sessions that Councillor Deans and I have co-hosted. You've heard from people who actually live in the area, work in the area, visit family members in the area, that the U-turn, the reliance on U-turns now is not ideal. Many people think it's unsafe now to begin with. We are not disagreeing with the volume of traffic on Hunt Club and that many intersections are failures, and at peak times the road just doesn't adequately move traffic. So when we look at your proposal in isolation of everything else, some people might say it's reasonable, right? But we have to factor in what the current challenges are and what this will do, how it will compound those types of issues. Just for everyone's understanding, there's the proposal development there. If you are exiting this site and you want to go westbound, you will need to turn right, pass the airport park. This is under the bridges. You cannot do U-turns here. You're going to come all the way up here to Dawsey. This is Dawsey, and that's Bridle Path. This is the South Keys Mall, so you have lots of cars turning right. So every time I go to the mall and someone abruptly stops to do a U-turn, there's a near accident. And as I'm leaving here to come home, I take the Parkway home, you're looking due east. You're making sure that there's no oncoming traffic. You're not looking at the guy that's doing a U-turn here. So collision stats might be low, but I can tell you on a daily basis there are near misses. If I'm coming from the airport, I'm a tourist, I'm going to come off. I'm going to come here and I go, hey, there's my hotel. How do I get in there? I got to go all the way down here to McCarthy, and this is Downpatrick, and I'm going to do a U-turn here. Heavily used bus stop here, lots of pedestrians from the south end, and again, I'm going to come all the way back and come in here. So what I've looked at with staff and Claridge is, could you do a median block? This is the Windsor Park Seniors Residence here, and you can't do it here because there's a left-hand turning lane to go northbound on the Parkway, so wouldn't be wise to do that here. But if you did it here, you could actually serve Windsor Park, but you could also allow people to get into that property now. So that's something that's been proposed. Claridge was not interested in that request, and city staff didn't back up the local councillors on that. So people who live in the community, know the issues here, know that this is a safety issue. So there's some frustration there. So, what is Claridge willing to do to make this safer? There really hasn't been anything offered from Claridge. There's no cyclists, very few cyclists on Hunt Club because you take your life into your hands, and that's not an exaggeration. Cars go above 80 kilometers an hour, the sheer volume. I cannot in good conscience recommend to my residents to bike on Hunt Club, and you see few pedestrians. Can you imagine senior citizens here trying to get to the South Keys malls about here? So you're going to ask seniors to cross Hunt Club and then get up there. There's a bit of a pedestrian pathway. I just cannot see that happening. And I'll comment in a few minutes about what staff and I are working on to improve safety. But what is Claridge? Claridge comes with cities' collision stats and say, well, look, because there are few collisions, therefore it's not unsafe. And I'm saying it is unsafe. People who live in the community, who are experiencing this every day, know what those challenges are. And that's why the transportation issues with this particular proposal has been the biggest sticklers for me, and Councillor Deans can speak for her residents as well. So is Claridge willing to put anything else on the table at this time, just on improving overall safety?
Is that a question that I can respond to? Because I can. Thank you. So regarding the mid-block median break, Claridge has advised us that go ahead with it if that's what makes people happy. We have advised them, don't do it. It's unsafe. It is more unsafe than doing it at a signal. At a signal, I can make it safer. I can give you full protection so you don't get the chance to decide, is that gap big enough for me or not? You can't go. You only go on your phase. Or I can make peak hour or all-day turn restrictions, if residents are comfortable with that, for people turning right on red out of Downpatrick, so you take the bus factor out of it as well. There are ways to make it safer at that signalized intersection than throwing it to the wind and letting people judge for themselves mid-block with nothing to help them. Is it safe to turn now against that 1,500 vehicles per hour opposing me? I don't think it's a good idea.
Madam Chair, just on that note, because staff and I have had a number of discussions about a mid-median break, when the example I always give is the one on Riverside Drive in front of the St. Pat's home. Very similar distance between Brookfield and the Mooney's Bay entrance. 2 lanes of traffic in each way, similar heavy volumes, heavy at rush hour, northbound, heavy going southbound in the afternoon. In front of the St. Pat's home, we have a mid-medium break, no traffic light. Very similar situation to what the consultant's referring to. Why is it okay to have a mid-median break on Riverside Drive, but not on Hunt Club Road?
I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't have a specific answer for that. Every location has its specific nuances in terms of sight lines and traffic volumes, so it'd be very difficult at this point to really compare those 2 sites.
My ultimate goal is to improve safety for all users. And what I've been told by staff thus far is a mid-median break on Hunt Club would not be as safe as U-turns, where you have pedestrians, where you have cyclists, where you have the bus pulling in to stop, where you have people running to catch the bus, where you have cars. They're both very active intersections. I'm not the expert, but I know what I see and I know what my residents tell me. And I can't see when you have a mid-median break, you're going to have as many variables at play as at those intersections. You're not going to have pedestrians, you're not going to have cyclists. You're going to wait until it's clear to make that turn. People will make that judgment to make that turn. So that's what I'm trying to wrestle with is I want to improve overall safety, and we're being told mid-median break here is not safe, but we have them in other places in the city, including other places in the ward. So that's why I asked that question.
I think they said they can't answer you. So I know that you do have other things to talk about. Okay. So do you have more questions? Okay. Does anyone have questions for the delegations? Thank you for coming today. Do you want to go back? Councillor Deans, did you want to speak, or did you want, or should?
When we get to the speaking part, I want to speak. I actually have one question for staff.
Perfect. So we're at questions and speaking part now. Councillor Deans.
Thank you. Awesome. I just want to follow up with something Colin spoke about earlier, because I think that's really important. I mean, this whole issue, I understand why the staff are kind of moving toward agreeing to something on this site, because, you know, it's part of our intensification policies and it's a significant site, the significant cross-section of 2 significant roads in the city of Ottawa. So, okay, I can kind of follow that. But what I'm having a lot of trouble following is the safety issue. And in my mind, incrementality is the enemy of good transportation planning, because you hear the women sit here and they just say, well, you know, it only adds 28 cars. Okay, but if you let every single development along Hunt Club Road add more and more and more when it's already failing, and you say, well, you can't deny them because that's a good site, but if we were looking at it all in one day, we would never approve that much because it's a safety issue for our residents. So that is a big problem for me. You don't want to, it's the last one in, doesn't want to get bruised more, but wait a second, what about all these residents? We heard in the 2 public meetings from the residents that they're very concerned about safety. And so am I. I'm a daily user of that road. Councillor Brockington did a really good job of describing the challenges at that intersection at Dazé. And that one, when the cars are coming out of the mall, they're not expecting a U-turn. I've seen it firsthand. It's a challenging intersection at best. And we're contemplating allowing 2 8-story buildings, and everyone that's going in the opposite direction to either the right in or right out are going to be doing U-turns on Hunt Club Road, a road that's already failing at peak time. So the question I wanted to ask Colin is, he said, well, because it's already E or F, we would focus on the pedestrian cycling links to the transit. But my goodness, I mean, anybody that knows that section of roadway knows that you're taking your life in your hands going along there. If I'm in the retirement residence, I got a walker. You think I'm going along Hunt Club Road and trying to cross that at the Airport Parkway to get to the transit station? I don't know what you would do other than maybe a pedestrian bridge over Hunt Club Road. And is that what we're talking about? Because if that's what we're talking about, let's talk about it today, because that's a huge cost. And who's going to pay for that?
Okay.
So I want to know if that's what the safety is. What does that look like? How much is it going to cost, and who's going to pay for it?
What, the pedestrian bridge, another pedestrian bridge in this area?
Getting pedestrians and cyclists safely to the transit station, because that's what Colin said we would have to focus on.
But whether he considers it to be a problem, we didn't hear him say that in the general scope of things. He said, yeah.
Madam Chair, there is a new footbridge planned over the Hunt Club Road as part of the Trillium Line extension to be implemented by 2021.
Where is that?
That's adjacent to the existing rail line that crosses Hunt Club currently.
Can you just use that thing to show me where that would be?
There's an existing rail bridge right here for the Trillium Line, and the footbridge would parallel this structure here as part of the Trillium Line extension.
So I would still have to go under the Airport Parkway.
That's correct. Yeah. So as part of the transportation analysis, we'd look at the pedestrian levels of service, the corner turning radii, the pedestrian crossing distances, the pavement marking and signage plans, and the basic route to get to that crossing in a safe way.
And have you looked at any of those things?
There will be a pedestrian safety audit for this location, and that study is being initiated as part of this application.
Okay, and presuming that safety audit will make recommendations for how we can safely get our pedestrians and cyclists to that transit station, who has the obligation to pay for those recommendations?
Transportation master plan. You know how these things go, Councillor Jeans, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's correct, Madam Chair. It would be through the development charge funds and as part of the capital project as part of the Trillium Line extension.
The question would be, has a development charge been set up specifically for this purpose, or would it be included in any development charges that are being accrued?
Right. Like if we're creating a safety issue for pedestrians and cyclists, do we assign that to the developments that are creating the issue?
Okay, so first of all, we're taking a large leap here and assuming that this is the worst place in the city, and if they do a study, it's going to bump up to the top. We all know that that is not the way things are done here. We know that there's so many, whether it's crossing guards or whatever the process is, in our capacity, we have the ability to do X amount of work, and we do accrue development charges for projects. In this case, which is why I asked Councillor Brockington to talk about what measures that Mr. Simpson is alluding to that he's going to talk about, that he has already started, getting ready for the next transportation master plan and talking specifically about this area for pedestrians. He started that work. He just has chosen not to just kind of torment us and not put it on the table. But he has it.
Okay, well, I'm not necessarily assuming it's the worst in the city, but I am assuming that it is bad enough that it needs to be addressed in the interest of safety of the residents that Councillor Brockington and I serve. And I don't think we should be approving things that we sense are unsafe without some sort of a strategy for making them safer than I think they are today. Which I guess kind of brings me to the point. I understand this balance between intensification, infill development, good infill development, but all the other buildings in the area, all the other hotels, and let me tell you, Hunt Club Road is hotels and retirement homes. That's what we got. And we got plenty of them already. They're all 6 stories. So I don't understand the rationale for agreeing to add more when we already have this significant transportation challenge. So can somebody maybe explain, for all of our benefit, why we would go above and beyond everything else in the neighborhood?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start, and perhaps Colin and JC can fill in any blanks. So certainly, we heard earlier it's a TOD area. So that's you touched on the competing interests in the official plan. So it's transit supportive. These are the kind of areas where we want to see intensification. The site is also unique, as we heard earlier. If you look at some of the other seniors projects that touch right onto the backyards of homes, perhaps an 8 or 9 story would not be appropriate there. I'd suggest it wouldn't be. This site is very unique, as we heard, and we have to look at the impacts and compatibility, and it's staff's opinion that there is no impact in terms of that.
I don't think I really heard the answer to why would they get 2 stories more than all of the other developments we're allowed to have all the way down Hunt Club Road.
To some, it's a different site. It's a unique site.
And with all due respect, they are, we have had several applications for Bank Street in the recent past, and I'm talking the last 2 months, where the height has been the height has been higher by 2 stories than on Bank Street than what the community association, et cetera, were anticipating. They have the right to make the application. We have the right to refuse it.
Well, right. That's why I'm asking, why would we agree to it?
Well, that'll be, you don't get to vote on this committee, as you know, but certainly at council you can choose, as you know, to vote however you want.
I'm just right now asking the questions. What's the rationale? Why would we do that when there's already these significant transportation challenges? I just wanted to ask a question about the topography.
Before you do, Ms. Madden wanted to say something.
Madam Chair, I just want to reiterate what Mr. Herwire had said, that each and every time that we review an application, we review it on its specific merits. So in some cases, staff may support additional stories, and then there are other cases that don't come to Planning Committee when we don't support it. So there are certain circumstances that staff are always reviewing, and certainly each and every site is viewed under its own merits.
Okay. I still don't get the rationale for why in this case, when we had such major challenges on Hunt Club Road, that this would be an appropriate place to give them more density than everybody else got, but whatever. So I just wanted to ask about the topography of the site, because some residents have expressed concern about the height, and when I look at that site, it's got quite a significant grade change on it. So are these buildings going to be built on the top of the hill, or is that going to be all graded out?
Just discussing, Madam Chair, with JC, and there will be some leveling out of the site, just to make it work. We could follow up with specifics in terms of, we don't have the grading plan here with us.
Yeah, because the resident that raised this with me said his impression was because of that significant grade, it would actually probably look more like 10 stories than it would 8, because it's going to sit way up on a hill. And I would think for Councillor Brockington's residents, that might even be more of a concern.
We'd be pleased to follow up. Again, perhaps the applicant has that information here, but we can certainly obtain that.
Okay, good. And just one last thing, and that is Councillor Brockington and I have one little difference of opinion on this, and that is that mid-block access that he suggested. I just can't see how that would be safer. Not that I think that this is safe at all what's being proposed, but I just don't know that a mid-block U-turn with cars coming as fast as they do on Hunt Club would actually be safer. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Brockington?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to members of the committee for your interest on this matter, and to staff and the residents of the community who've come out today. Just a few comments before we vote. First of all, the good news, staff will be undertaking a pedestrian safety study of this particular intersection at Hunt Club and the Parkway. They will review data analysis of volumes, collision history, speeds. They'll do a site visit, and they'll be making some recommendations. So that is part of the pedestrian and cycling safety initiative, and that I think is good news for the immediate community. Some concerns about noise were raised, many before today's meeting, and we heard from some delegations about noise. Again, a commitment from Mr. Simpson that he will work with me and the community to do an updated, he calls it an investigation, but at least a review of current noise levels to make sure that any mitigation in place now is sufficient. So I appreciate that commitment from Colin. Madam Chair, I'm not going to repeat issues I raised with the consultant for Claridge. Certainly my main concern from the beginning was traffic in and out, and certainly it's been said many times about many of the challenges that we have on Hunt Club Road now. People refer to the street in many cases as the Hunt Club Parkway, and my vision or thoughts of a parkway as a scenic route. It's quick to get from point A to point B, and there are a few interchanges intersecting that road. That's certainly not the case of Hunt Club anymore. I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life, born and raised in Ottawa, and just like the Airport Parkway, I would go to the Airport Parkway Bridge at Walkley, biking with my dad. We'd stop for a break. I could count one car, wait a few minutes, another car. Now it's a major north-south arterial road, certainly not a parkway. That's just a name and not an actual designation. With the opening of the access at the 417 in the east, when we've seen the developments along Hunt Club over the years, the commercial developments around Merivale, it has slowed and clogged this major east-west artery in the city, and people in my ward keep saying, Councillor, how are you going to fix the problem? How are you going to fix the Hunt Club Bridge congestion, the congestion on Hunt Club, which starts about 2:15 in the afternoon now, people going westbound in the ward, and certainly it is a concern. But safety is a number one concern for us. I think the request by the community to lower the height to 6 is reasonable. You've heard from Councillor Deans that other buildings in the area about 6 stories, and when you factor in a lot of the safety issues that we have, that is reasonable. You're not having a strong number of residents come out that says don't support this at all, don't build it. Many people have said publicly they support a reasonable development at this site, that they could accommodate and could welcome something into the neighborhood, but 2 8-story buildings is not something that the community has embraced, and that's why you see a motion here, a reasonable motion to cap the heights at 6, which again is consistent with what we see in the immediate community. There are other things I will work with staff with a site plan. Trees, Madam Chair, I'll just comment publicly, has been a major issue as well, and there has been a greater commitment by Claridge to retain more trees on site, and certainly with the site plan with staff to ensure that they follow through on that commitment. I promised a colleague I wouldn't ask a question, but just one question of clarification. It's been noted in the staff report that we could make some changes to the traffic light patterns at McCarthy, Downpatrick, and Hunt Club, that if people are going to do U-turns on the western side, we can maybe put a right-hand turn restriction on red to improve overall safety. Are those types of changes basically more or less cost neutral or very low cost, and who would be responsible if there was a cost?
Madam Chair, that would be something we'd look through the detailed design process for the road modifications and pavement marking and signage plan. It would be at the cost of the applicant, but that doesn't seem very difficult in my mind.
Okay, so if this goes through, I do believe that would make that intersection safer if this proceeds, and I will be following through with staff on that matter. So, Madam Chair, I am putting my motion on the floor about the height reduction to 6 stories that was introduced when we first debated this. So I would like the committee to make a decision on that, and I appreciate, again, the debate and discussion that we've had on this item. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Brockington. So we have Vice Chair Tierney has moved a motion. He's taken one back. He has the motion with the holding provision. Do you want to just read the therefore so that we all remember?
Again? All right. Therefore, be resolved that document 3 details of the recommended zoning of the report be amended to add the following text to section 2C, that the holding provision be added to the zoning permitting a hotel but restricting the residential use for the proposed apartment area to be lifted subject to the acceptance of a traffic study for the apartment confirming no adverse impacts on the operation of the road network to the satisfaction of the General Manager of Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development. Be it further resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act.
All right. So on that motion, is that carried? Carried. Okay, now on Councillor Brockington's motion on the height reduction from 8 to 6. No? I think we've talked about it enough, so do the therefore be it resolved. Okay.
Just to remind committee.
Unless you want to. I mean, it's up to you, but I think
everyone's clear what the motion is?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I am. I don't know if somebody else wants to hear it. No, just do the tail end of it.
Well, they're all therefore clauses. Be resolved that document 3 details of recommended zoning be amended to reduce the recommended maximum permitted height from 26 meters to 20, such that both buildings cannot exceed 6 stories. Further resolved that any further details in document 3 be revised to implement the recommended 6-story development, and be it further resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act.
Ayes and nays. Councillor Blais? Councillor Brockington?
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Councillor Cloutier?
No.
Councillor Hubley? No. Councillor Leeper?
No.
Councillor Nussbaum?
No.
Councillor Kadri?
No.
Vice Chair Tierney?
No.
Myself, no. That is 8 to 2. Okay, so on the report as amended? Carried? Dissent noted by Councillor Brockington. Okay, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. This is going to be going forward to council next week, week after? Next week. Huh? Next week. That's like next week. Next week. Wow. Okay, so we have one item left. It's on Councillor Vice Chair Tierney. Pull out your motion. Pull out your motion on the inclusionary zoning, the referral from this committee to council.
That's the therefore be resolved that's in front of you. All right. Therefore, be it resolved that Council approve the comments to the Ontario Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing on its proposed regulations on inclusionary zoning as described below, and further detailed in staff technical submission set out in Appendix A of this motion. A, that the regulation include a companion inclusionary zoning regulation addressing rental housing. B, that the province of Ontario recognize the current municipal investments and incentives for affordable housing and reconsider the requirements for municipalities to offset the 40% of the cost through the specific incentives, as it would impede the current programs municipalities are offering. C, that the province of Ontario provide the funding to municipalities, to offset the cost of implementing the regulations. And D, that the municipal decision-making be permitted in key provisions such as unit set-aside rates, offset replacement restrictions, and the equity sharing models, and be it further resolved that Council direct the City Clerk and the Solicitor to forward a letter to the Ontario Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing with a copy of this motion and the staff technical submissions attached as Appendix A for their information and consideration. Be it further resolved that Council direct the General Manager of Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development or his designate to follow up with the Ministry on the additional procedural and technical concerns, to continue to work with the Ministry to communicate possible impacts and to incorporate considerations of the new legislation on the inclusionary zoning of any relevant upcoming studies and reviews, including the R4 review and preparations for the next official plan and the report out to the Planning Committee and Council as appropriate. And also be it resolved that the following motion be referred to the City Council meeting of January 31st, 2018 for consideration.
Great. So, and just to remind you, February 1st, I think we have to have an opinion, or we should have opinion, to the province, and that's our first opportunity as a council. So on the referral, is it carried? Okay, thank you very much. Any notices of motion? How about inquiries? Why am I on this? Okay, we're adjourned, and the next meeting is February the 13th.